got a lot of surface area. So some have what looks sort of like a sponge, and inside of that are all these tubes going up into it. So these tubes going back up into these sort of sponge-like ones, those give it a lot of surface area. Others have little ridges. Others have little divots in it for creating more surface area. All of those are places where the mushroom makes spores. And so that's what mushrooms are. So when you pick a mushroom, it's not like picking a wildflower where you pick the plant. Picking a mushroom is like picking an apple off of a tree. You're picking the fruit, the structure which is going to create those spores.
Is there a special name for this kind of reproduction? Not pollination.
So it's not pollination. I would say luck. So it's a difficult way of reproducing. Those little grains of dust, like a seed when it goes out, there's all the genetic information to make the new plant. There is also, with that, a little packet of food. It's a little lunchbox that comes along with it that gets the plant started. Some plants that we're very familiar with, ones which we eat, often have a big lunchbox attached to it. So like a coconut is mostly lunchbox, right? With a little bit of the genetic information to make a new coconut plant. A corn plant is a little bit down at the bottom, which can make the new corn plant, and the rest is just food. With the spores, it's just throwing out a whole bunch of, say, the genetic information with no lunchbox. Just like, you better land someplace good, right? And good luck to you. But they just make billions of them. And then there's good chances of one of those landing in the right place. So what we're going to do is take a look at a little bit of the structure of your standard. Usually when people think of a mushroom, we think of these things with the gills and the other stuff. We're going to take a look at the structure of that and what's going on there, and then figure out some really cool ways of understanding, simplifying that structure so you can quickly draw it. And then I'm going to show you a few little details that will greatly improve the sketches and drawings that you make and make it much easier to take what you see and get that down on paper. And I'm going to show you the best mushroom gill drawing trick ever. You ready?
Yes.
So here's like mushroom 101. So each one of the parts of a mushroom has been named, and each part has two names. One is more the scientific name, useful when you're talking to scientists, and those are the terms which most people are familiar with and use. You might want to, just to train your memory, pick up both. If you happen to go to a fungus fair or talking to a mycologist, a mushroom expert, having some of this vocabulary will help. So first there's this cap that's on the top. That's called the cap, right? It's also called the pileus. I've heard other people say pileus, but the coolest mushroom biologist that I met called it a pileus, so I'm going to go with that. So that's the cap of the mushroom. And then there's this stem-like thing that it is holding it up. This stem-like thing, they tend not to call a stem because that confuses it with plant words. So it's called either a stalk or a stipe. Usually the mycology people will call it a stipe. So we have the stipe holding up the cap. On the underside of the cap, these are the structures that make the spores. So those aren't these gills aren't the spores themselves. These are the structures that the spores are made of. So those are called the lamellae, or also called the gills. And you find them on the underside of the cap because there's not mushroom on top. Thank you. So there's a couple other weird. So most mushrooms that you're going to look at are going to have these three parts. Some of them will have a couple extra bonus parts. So for some mushrooms, as they are growing, I'm going to draw a side view. This is dry erase, right? Yes. Here's a side view of a mushroom. And the gills hang out in this area here. So I've cut this mushroom in half. So we're seeing a side view of the gills. Some mushrooms, as the mushroom is growing, they have a little membrane or a veil that covers these growing gills. And then as the mushroom gets bigger, this membrane breaks, and it can either break here at the edge with the cap or here at the edge of the body. So if it breaks on the edge of the cap, it's going to hang down and form a little skirt. Right? That is the annulus, or the ring. Right? So you'll see some of them will have this little ring. The mushroom will have a ring hanging down around it. It also could break here and just dangle down like this from this edge. Right? So that little veil could either turn into a ring or just little dangling bits on the edge of the cap of the mushroom. Some mushrooms, as they start to grow, here's a very little mushroom, just starting off, baby mushroom. As they start to grow, are encased in a membranous envelope called a veil. And this wrapper goes all around them. And as they grow a little bit larger, they start to stretch this and it tears. So as it grows, it now has, here's the bottom part of it, and you might have a few little pieces, chunks of it left on the top of this. But here's the bottom part of this veil that forms a vulva, or a cup, on the bottom of the mushroom. So not all mushrooms are going to have this, but here's this little cup. And some of those same kinds, you can see little fragments of material on the top of the mushroom cap here. Sometimes they're in big chunks, sometimes they're in little pieces. Those are also part of this veil. So on this one here, see those little white specks up there? Those are little pieces of the veil that were the other side of this cup. So those are a few little pieces of mushroom anatomy. And as you're looking at fungus, this is just good stuff to keep in mind. You're going to be seeing lots of variations on this. One really effective way of understanding the structure of a mushroom that you are looking at, here's just a quick view. Here's a mushroom that is growing, starting to stretch out. This is one that had one of these membranes here. And you can see as this mushroom is growing, these membranes are stretching, breaking, and you see the gills up inside there. So a very powerful way of understanding the anatomy of any mushroom, if you want to get a really good diagram of it, you can do a drawing of it from the side, a little bit an angle underneath. Another thing you can do that's very powerful is to slice it in half and look at the cross section of it. So from the top, not cutting it this way, but cutting it through this way, you can get this side view of what it looks like on the inside. So, for instance, this little mushroom here, this is one of these ones with this sort of pad of sponge-like material on the underside of it. I take a look in cross-section, I can see that that sponge-like material is actually a whole series of little tubes. Each one of those tubes lined with material that can make spores. Here I see one with gills hanging on the underside. Here, long gills dangling down that I can't really see when it's all closed up here. But on the inside, there's a whole bunch of long, other way, long gills dangling down. This is kind of neat with this, some short gills, some medium length, some longer gills. Here is a top view of a mushroom. Or actually, an underside view. Here will be that stalk sticking out the bottom. Here are gills going to that stake. Sometimes they will have little half gills in there as well. And sometimes there are little quarter gills between those. So here is a side view of that same thing. So gills can be arranged in different sorts of ways. if you have an opportunity to slice a mushroom in half and immediately draw what you see, and color in what you see, this is a really great thing to do. Sometimes what you'll discover is when you do cut it like this, it will start to color change right in front of your eyes. It's really fun. So here's how I go about drawing a basic mushroom. All right, let's kind of block that out. And then we're going to add a bunch of tricks to this that are going to enable you to take this basic mushroom plan and adapt it for whatever fungus you happen to be peeking at. Ready? So the first thing I do is I start with an ellipse. And what that's going to represent is the shape of the underside of this cap. Generally speaking, the underside is a circle. If I look at any circle from an angle, what I see is an ellipse. So this is my representation of the underside of the mushroom that I'm looking at. So I'm going to be looking at one from perhaps an angle where I can see a little bit of the underside. I could tilt it like this so I don't have to draw any of those gills, but then I don't get to draw the gills. All right? This view a lot easier. How do I handle that if I see a little bit underneath there? I start with the ellipse. Then what I do is I look at the shape of the cap. Some caps are tall and conical. Some have a little bump, pimple on the very top. All right? Some are very flat. Some are even V-shaped, convex. All right? So I look at what is the shape of the cap, and I draw that on top there. So this could be something that has a little pimple on top of it. All right? This could be something that is much taller. There can be a lot of variation in the shape of the top, but I've just chosen this. Now what I'm going to do is draw crosshairs through that ellipse. This is going to do a couple of very, very, very helpful things. The first is it helps me find the center of my mushroom's cap. And that's where my stalk is going to come in. I'm going to draw another oval or ellipse right there about the same shape, but just smaller. From here, my stalk comes down from the outside edges of that. Now we're starting to look like a mushroom. But it gets better. Because remember I said there are a couple of things that those crosshairs do that are really handy? One thing they do is they help me figure out, this is key, the orientation or the direction that the gills are on the underside of this cap. And I can make my picture even better by adding more lines that are all going to go from one edge through that point and out to the other side. I'm just going to draw a bunch of lines that go through that middle point. Or you can just start from that middle point and draw them out to an edge. Or you can draw it all the way through. Probably easiest just to start there. You don't have to have one opposite. But if I've got those basically placed in, and the ones here at the bottom, get some of these, the ones that are kind of peeking out like this, those are going to help a lot. Get some of those guys. Those ones are a lot more helpful than even some of those up there. We'll see why in just a moment. If I erase the part or draw lightly in that part in the middle, I have my basic mushroom diagram. Ooh. This generic mushroom will be changed in just a moment to sort of match the real things that we're seeing. But you see how this basic framework, this is what's behind a lot of the mushrooms that I draw. These basic ideas. This way of handling what the gills are doing is extremely helpful. It's going to help you avoid the most common problem people have in drawing mushroom gills, which is this. Here's what people do. I'm going to draw the underside of a mushroom here, and there will be something wrong with it, and see if you can spot what's wrong with this picture. We're good so far, right? So what people will do is they will go what's wrong with that picture? It looks pretty much right. It looks pretty good. And it's very seductive to do what I just did. What's off?
The center of the lines is not meeting in the middle there.
The center of where these lines connect is not meeting here. This one is, and this one is, this one is. These ones are doing okay, but especially as we get down here in the bottom half, these ones are all, on this side, are all pointing to a focus point right here, and these ones here are all pointing to a focus point right there. Because what I did is, as I came around that corner, I just started so focusing them here, not here. People get into the same problem when they're drawing a flower, right? They will go do 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 do. Where I've got a focus point here and a focus point here, instead of a focus point right in the middle, where all the petals point to it. You see the difference? So this one note. Yeah, that's on. Does this point make sense? So if I am bringing everybody through the middle, look at how these lines are, they're coming up to this point instead of I'm aiming here instead of doing that. See the difference? These ones down here, it's hard to get the angles on these ones here. But if you aim everybody to that point right there, you're golden. Any questions? This same shape, here I'm looking at the underside of the mushroom. If I happen to be looking at this side of it, this same drawing really works. You see, the bottom here, this is the lower far edge of the ellipse, and this is the top edge of the cap. Right? If I erase this stuff in the middle here, I can make this the close edge of the ellipse, and there's my little mushroom. So the ellipse wasn't here. This bottom curve is created by the ellipse on the bottom. This top curve is the shape of the cap, and that can be doing all these sort of crazy things. The bottom is still going to be that same ellipse. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. But wait, there's more. Because you're about to learn the best gill trick ever. Are you ready?
Ready.
So the best gill trick ever. Now you thought that was pretty cool, kind of aligning those gills, all right? But here is here's the problem. A lot of mushrooms, like the mushrooms which we usually get, the agaricus we get in the supermarket, have these very, very dark gills. Lots of mushrooms you're going to be looking at have white gills. You're looking at white-gilled mushrooms. And when we get our pencil and we're drawing the underside of our mushroom, and we start drawing all these things in, all of a sudden we are making the underside of this thing really, really dark because we're drawing in all these gills. So how can you draw in all the gills on a white mushroom without turning them dark. Well, check this out. Now, there's a very, very subtle thing, but once you see this, you'll be like, ooh, that's cool. I can work this. I can work this. What you're going to do is you're going to look at the underside of this mushroom. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it towards you, and I am going to be rotating it like this. And what I want you to notice is that on the underside, on the side that is facing where you are, I'm going to bring this around so that everybody can see, and also show you guys, that you're going to see on the side that is facing straight towards you, you are looking down between the gills. As you're looking out on the sides, you're looking out on the face of the gills. You're not looking down into the alley. You think of these, you're looking down as if there's an alley right in front of you, a big dark alley, you see it going all the way down. You look down the street, there may be alleys coming out there, but you can't see into them. That's what's going to be happening here. The ones that are right, coming straight towards you, you're looking down into the alley. Right? You're going to see dark shadows in there. And I'm going to rotate it, and you're going to see that there's this dark zone that is going to keep in the same place pointing towards you, no matter how I turn it. Can you see how that part that is closest to you, right? You see that? See how that part in there, see that as I move it, there's that little dark zone that stays in the same place? Is that cool? This is going to be essential for getting a really good drawing of this. I don't know if this is going to work for our front. Can we do close focus?
All right, hold a second.
All right.
Go back a little bit.
Go back a little bit?
Yeah. Okay, that's good.
All right, so, and what you probably are seeing is there'll be a dark, shadowy zone somewhere in there that as I'm spinning this, try this with a mushroom that you have, that you find outside your house. Let's show you guys so you see what I'm talking about. The side that will be the closest to you, like right up in here, all right? See that little place where you can sort of see into the cracks? Can you even see it from that distance? Yeah. Isn't that neat? Yeah. So this is going to really help you draw it. See what I'm talking about? If you don't see it, say I don't see it. And I'll make sure you see it. Right? Because it will really help you draw. Yeah? Isn't that neat? It's like this sort of moving dark zone in the middle and light on the sides. Right? So when I hold it still, it's hard to see. But as I move it like this, you can see that that dark zone is staying right there in the center. Groovy? You saw it. All right. So how do I handle this? What I'm going to do, I've got dark in the middle where I'm seeing down the alley, and out on the side, I'm looking along the plane of those gills. So the gills that are facing towards me, that's where I'm going to put darker shadows in there, and then let it get light out on the sides. Right? So out on the sides here, light, in the part that I'm looking straight into it, I'm looking into the shadows. Right? Here's a very kind of quick, sketchy one. So this part here, and compare that with how I handle that. And what that does is allows you to give the feeling, the skin can be mostly white, but you can see that you're looking at these individual gills. So the way that I go about drawing this, I start with this part here. What I'm drawing with my pencil is not the gill. It's the shadow between the gills. So I'm going to draw a gill here by putting a shadow on either side of it. It often helps to have a few of those little guidelines sort of helping me kind of see that I'm kind of going out which way that I want. And I'm going to do that especially as up in this area right in the front. And it's going to get less as I go out this way. And then when I get out in here, I'm going to just have a few little lines that kind of suggest. And I might get a little bit of this action happening back here. With just a handful of lines, you can really get a sense of the gilliness of what you're looking at. That's a cool trick. That is the best gill trick ever. So you now have a way of understanding what the alignment of these gills is, and a way to draw them, so you're actually drawing what you see. You're not drawing the gill, you're drawing the shadow between the gills, and out on the sides you can't see those shadows as well. Okay, you can see it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So you just missed the best gill trick ever.
I see that.
But it is going to be on film, so you'll have a chance of catching up with this. Thank you very much for taking the video for us. Now let's think of, so if the plane of the gills is a big flat thing, I'm then just sort of focusing on the best gill trick ever and kind of working with that. Oh, this is kind of fun. Look at these big sort of shards of that veil that was underneath. They were kind of hanging out on the edge of this. But sometimes it's not a flat plane of gills. There's a curve to it. And what that does is, when we look at the underside, in cross-section, if my gills curve in like that, I'm going to get this sort of interesting effect of not being able to see the part that's back here if I'm looking from over here, but I can see this front edge. So here's how I'm going to handle this. Here we go. So if there is this mass of gills that are sort of pooching down and then swoop up on the inside, what I often see is instead of this kind of a view, I'm going to have this little area of gills that hangs down. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line that's not going to go all the way from here to here, but it's going to kind of soften, get bolder here, and then I'm going to lose it somewhere over here. That's what I've got right here. I've got a little ridge. See, in the middle here, I'm seeing the bottom of that ridge very clearly. As I get over here to this side, the exact shape of the edge of that little ridge becomes difficult for me to see. I lose the angle on it. And the same thing happens over here. So then what I'll do in this area is, this is where I'm drawing kind of the front edges of my gills, and I'm going to curve them out, these ones out this way, these ones I curve out this way, and I'll be using that gill trick on it. Deeper shadows in this area right here, less so as I'm going out in both of these directions. Take a look at this little mushroom here. See how there's this little ridge here. Exactly what the edge of it is doing on this side is hard to say. Exactly what the edge of it is doing on this side of it is hard to say. But it's very clear right through here. Right? Ripples like this are something that you're going to commonly see on drawing lots of drawing subjects. So this isn't a mushroom-specific thing. Things that are sort of rippling, this edge is clear, and then it's not towards those sides. It's going to be something that is very, you're going to see a lot. So here is, you'll often see that same sort of thing in throats of flowers. As you're sort of drawing something kind of coming into the throat of the flower.
Question?
Yes?
The center of those gills on the ridge, are they also centered on the center of the ellipse?
In this case, the location of the center of the ellipse is, it could be here, it could be here, it could be here. We don't really know where that is. We don't know how far that goes up.
Because we don't see it.
Because we don't, it's out of our view. So we're no longer kind of tracking that. In this case, what I'm doing for this little row here is they're generally coming down straight in front of me and then starting to curve out like that on this side and curving more in that direction on this side. Yeah, Alex.
So on that picture, this is not on all of them, but I've noticed that on the cap of the mushroom, you have little remainders of the gills.
Mm-hmm.
So what is that? Like, is that only
Like these little nuggets here?
No, like those like things on the cap, like the kind of line thingies.
Oh, these here.
Yeah, that.
Oh, sometimes you'll see a little bit of a hint of, on some mushrooms, you'll see a little impression of the gill that's attached on the other side, right there on the edge. And so you'll see that as that comes in, those little lines. And these, we're going to actually take advantage of the fact that there can be little lines on the edge of our gill, our caps in just a moment. When we're trying to, just as we're trying to kind of think of how the bottom sculpts right now, we'll be thinking about how the top sculpts in just a moment. Did that answer the question? So what you can do, therefore, is to then sculpt the masses of those gills. And it's the direction of those lines that are going to tell you what direction this surface is moving. Take a look at how in this one, these gills that are swooping up into that little dark void up there tells you the shape of that surface. So those lines on that surface tell you the shape of it. This, using sort of lines to kind of sculpt something like this, can be used on the underside. All right. If you notice here, I've got gills that are coming out, and then the gill turns down like that. So that gill comes out and down. Right. That change in direction tells you something about what is happening here with the shape of that gill bed. Also notice these little lines up in here. Can you see some of these vertical lines in the back there? Right. That suggests that this cap kind of comes out, gets to an edge, and then flattens out. Right. You can sort of feel that this is sort of a flat, thick edge, instead of this coming out to a smooth point like that. What I'm doing is I'm using lines to describe the contour of this thing. So and so for this, thinking about an umbrella really, really helps. Here's an umbrella. Any way you turn this umbrella, you're going to have one of those lines that, there's going to be one of those little ribs of the umbrella that's going to be coming straight towards you. It's going to be a straight line like this. Ones that are out on the edge, you're going to see the full curve of it. So the change in the shape of these tells you something about the shape of that umbrella. If you're looking at an umbrella, so there's two things that you're going to be keying in on. One is, what is the shape of those lines on it? Number two is, what is the shape of the edge itself? If you're looking at an umbrella that had a shape like this on the outside edge, that would tell you a tremendous amount about it. That could then be reinforced if you had ribs that were coming down it. See how those two things together describe that form? What is the shape of the edge, but then what is the contour of sets of lines that are going across that? So what we're going to do is, one of sort of in kind of progression of thinking about your mushroom drawings. If you're just starting, getting a line drawing that feels like this thing, that's great. All right? But then when people go, okay, now I want to fill it in, and what we do is we focus on just sort of looking at where is it dark and where is it light, and we make this sort of blurry, smudgy mark with our pencil. Right? It's a different way of thinking about things if we now start to think about how can I use lines to explain the shape, the contour of this object that I'm looking at. How can I use lines on the surface to describe the three-dimensional shape? So somebody could put their hand on it and they can say, I know that this is curving over smoothly like that. And over here it comes up, bump, and then it comes up again. All right? Those contour lines, all right, are what's doing that for you. And you can, and drawing mushrooms is a great way to introduce yourself to the idea of using contour lines to sculpt and shape whatever it is that you're drawing. You start with that, right? You can then apply this idea of these contour lines to anything that you are drawing, whether it be a pile of rocks, right? Whether it be the side of a bird, whether it be an elk or mountain. These contour lines sculpt and shape what you are seeing in front of you. I mean, take a look at this. Here's this funnel-shaped mushroom. It's got a big, you can drop down into it. And what gives it that effect? Well, part of it is that there's a shadow there. It's lighter here, and then we see a shadow going down in there. So I put that shadow in, and it still looked like it could be just kind of a blotch, a dark blotch. But once I put in, see these little white lines? Imagine you're an ant walking along the surface of this. You're going, oh, what is the trajectory that you're going to take? That's the white line that's on there. So as you come across different planes, the angle is going to change that you see that line. Yeah, Pax?
Okay, well, I have a little question about mushroom anatomy.
Yeah.
So, there was this video I saw where it wasn't exactly a mushroom, but it was a plant that looked a lot like that, except it was hanging upside down, and like ants would crawl on it, and they would fall inside. But do mushrooms, like, do some, I don't know why I'm saying this, but do some mushrooms have like traps? Like, do they ever like eat bugs or something?
So what you're doing is exactly the way that a naturalist should be thinking about things. You're saying, I'm seeing a structure here that reminds me of something else that I've seen. Right? And this is actually something that all of us should start to incorporate into our journaling. If you see something and say, you know what, that kind of reminds me of a pitcher plant that I've seen. You're describing the pitcher plants that are like the bug traps.
I think, yeah, I forgot what they're called.
Yeah. So you're saying this looks very much like the structure of a pitcher plant. All right? That's interesting. Then the next question that she's asking is that just a coincidence? Or is this structurally doing something that is similar to what a pitcher plant is doing? Maybe it is and maybe it's not. But investigating and having that, making that connection, if there's ever an "it reminds me of" that comes up in your mind, that this reminds me of something else that I've seen, explore what are the roots of that connection. And that's where really cool discoveries are made. So that is a perfect example of naturalist thinking. Right? She's doing what's called an "it reminds me of." Right? It's an "it's remind me of," and that's going to prompt her to make that really interesting question. Does this have a structure that is similar to what the pitcher plant is doing? To my knowledge, no. In this case, it's not. But the important thing is not whether it is or not, is actually getting yourself so that you notice that connection and can actually ask that question. That's a brilliant question, Pat.
So, another question. So, are there any mushrooms, this is just kind of relating to, like, are there any mushrooms that in any way, not like the same structure as the pitcher plant, but do they in any way trap something
Carnivorous.
well, not carnivorous.
Oh yeah, no, check this out. My favorite, personal favorite fungi is this fungus. It's a soil fungus, and what it does, it's got these little threads, and down underneath the soil, it has little lassos. Yeah, check this out. It's got these little lassos, and they're these little worms that are crawling through the dirt, right? And little nematodes are cruising along. And if the nematode goes through one of these things, the mushroom goes like, there's a nematode, and it constricts this ring. And then it catches this little nematode with its little ring, and the nematode's trying to get out. And then the mushroom sends all these little fibers into, and it digests and it eats them. Is that cool? Yeah. So yeah, a worm-eating mushroom, bam, right there.
Wow. So, a question about that. So, how does the mushroom, I mean, it constricts around that, but how does it get the nutrients into its, like, body?
That's how does it absorb and dissolve?
Yeah.
So you're asking. So what exactly? She's asking what is exactly the process that's going on. You've got like your mushroom all over whatever food thing it's eating. How is it getting the nutrients of this thing? It can't like take a bite, chomp. We understand about our kind of ingestion and digestion. So how can you digest without ingestion? That's a really good question, and I don't know the answer, but I'm going to try to find out. Another good way which you can find out is, so I'm going to do a little literature search. I'm sure that this is stuff that other people have